What's going on, my friends? I'm Dustin Stelzer with Electrician U, and today's Q&A day. So we start these things off. There's typically a flow to this whole thing. We're going to start off with some trivia. So today's trivia question is actually going to be from the codebook. It's a definition, so be sure that you listen all the way to the end of this thing so you get the answer at the end. But take a guess at which one this is. The definition is a conductor installed on the supply side of a service or within a service equipment enclosure or enclosures, or for a separately derived system that ensures the required electrical conductivity between metal parts required to be electrically connected, is the definition of bonding conductor, bonding jumper, equipment bonding jumper, main bonding jumper, supply side bonding jumper, or system bonding jumper. Which one do you think it is? Stay tuned to the end to find out. The first bit of this is the less technical questions. So this is for people that are apprentices, possibly aspiring apprentices, maybe homeowners, and the such. So let's get right into it. Jose G. Pisano asks, how long did it take you to feel confident bending EMT conduit? I've been doing it for about a year and I still mess up 3 saddle bends and simple offsets. My dude, you never really get good at conduit bending. You just get a little better each time. No, it takes a while, but it depends on how often you're doing it. So for me, within a couple months, I felt pretty good about it. There was still things like I didn't bend very many saddles. We did a lot of new construction when I first started, so I wasn't coming across situations where I would have conduit in the way that I had to bend more conduit. We planned out a lot of our runs, so we just didn't have to do that. So like the saddles always took me a while, right? Just because I didn't really run into that many of them. And then I worked for other companies where they're like, don't even bother bending saddles 3 points or 4 points. If you can put J boxes in more locations and do straight runs and just box offsets, like do that instead of all taking the time to bend all these crazy bends and then you screw one of them up and you got to rebend everything. So they just had a little bit different methodology. But I would say within my first year, I felt pretty damn good about conduit bending. But I was also always the guy that like in every situation, I was like, let me have the bender, let me do it, let me bend, I always wanted to be the one. So I got a lot of experience because I just forced that to happen. So it might take you a month. If you're bending conduit every single day for a month, that's a lot of conduit bending. In a month, you should be pretty damn good. A month doing anything every single day, you should be able to be good. But if you only do it, once a week or once a month or something like that, it might take you a year to feel confident. And then you have the downside of the fact that you go so long before doing again, so you kind of forget what you're doing. You forget what the multipliers and all that kind of stuff are. So don't worry about it. I mean, if you're going to be doing this for years and years and years, so like really don't worry about like how quick you are confident about it. It just means you need to bend more and more often, more frequently. Might help if you just go work with a commercial company for a while. Commercial, like new construction, you'll get exposed to a lot of it very often. Not telling you like quit your job. All right, Igor Zogan. Hey Dustin, how do I or where do I as a journeyman learn how to estimate electrical jobs? That's a tricky one. You're a journeyman. You shouldn't be learning to estimate jobs because you're probably trying to do side work, and that's illegal. But I don't know a single journeyman out there that's not doing side work. So there's a long, convoluted lot of answers to this question. For estimating, there's like the estimating software. I don't ever use estimating software, but some companies do. Estimating software kind of pulls in a whole bunch of different materials and it gives a cost to each one based off of whatever material prices you put in the system, also whatever time you put in the system that it costs for each item that you install. So it's able to kind of spit out for a receptacle. They know it's going to be like $9 or some cost that figures in the actual cost plus the profit margin you want plus the amount of time that it takes. I don't use software like that. I understand if you have like 1,000 electricians working for you and you're banging out tons of, estimates and stuff, and really big jobs and stuff like that, estimating software absolutely makes sense. But for small companies, people that are just starting out, people doing small jobs, really just having your own control over the pricing is the most important thing. I would ask your master electrician, just be like, hey, how do you price? Like, I'm not trying to compete with you or take your business or customers or anything. I'm just curious how you price jobs, and you can use fake numbers or whatever. If they'll show you, that would be a great thing. But normally it's off of time and material. It kind of depends. Some people do things by the square foot. So if there's like track homes, really quick homes that you can bang out, things that are like repeatable too, like a lot of like multifamily things, a lot of it can be bid by the square foot. Whereas if you're doing large custom homes, you can't do that because there's so many things that require extra time, and things change all the time, so you can't give a square price really. It just changes so much, and then you get constant change orders and things like that. But that's the new construction side. So then there's the service side, which service is always going to be on time and material. You're going to have an hourly rate, probably a trip charge to cover driving or drive time or any like vehicle expenses or anything like that. But it's going to be how much time you worked, whatever your hourly rate is, plus the materials that you bought. And I always put margin on top of materials. It's just a way to build in profit. I'm not trying to do this shit at cost. I'm trying to make money and save money and make more money to profit so that I can grow. So anyways, I hope that kind of answers your question. Like, there's if you were to call around to 20 electrical companies, you're gonna get 20 completely different prices, completely different ideologies on how to price and how to cost jobs and everything like that. Some people like me, it's just me working for myself, so I try to be very expensive and do very little work. I just want to work a couple days a week because I've got electrician. I've got like all kinds of other stuff that I'm doing. So me being out actually, turning screwdrivers and doing things out in the field, there's weeks where I'll have 5 jobs or, work for 5 straight days. But I like to get less work, and I like to be known as being very expensive, and people are on a waiting list to do work with me, and that I don't work all day every single day. I used to do that. I just don't do it anymore. I used to charge less to do that as well so that I could get more work. So there are some big companies that charge very little, like they want market share. They just want tons of jobs over and over. A lot of them have tons of employees. They just have to keep people employed, so they can afford to be the low cost people in town. And they'll give like free estimates. They don't charge any trip charges. They charge a low hourly rate, barely charge any markup on their materials because it doesn't matter. It's volume that's important to them. Whereas some other companies, are the opposite, like me, where I don't want that volume. I want to make a lot of money on very few jobs that I do. So anyways, there's a whole lot. Like, I should probably just do some videos on the different kinds of estimating and like charging customers and everything. But I would jump onto like Facebook. There's all kinds of Facebook groups where people are talking about this. Jump into our Discord server. There's a link down below. You can ask this kind of stuff. But what I would do is get into a group of other electricians and ask, rather than it just being my opinion. There's a lot of different people that have different ways of doing it. So you might get a better opinion if you're in a group of 5,000 people and you ask this question. Just more like a more well-rounded answer. All right, Andrew Campos, would it be too late to get into becoming an electrician at 40 years old? No, dude, you're still a kid. Well, no. As a 36-year-old man, I am very familiar with the fact that 40 is no longer a kid. Once you're 40, you're not young anymore. You can't even get away with bullshitting that you're young. Like, you're just not young anymore. You're not old, but you're not young. You're that cusp, that line where everybody's like old, young. You're right there in the middle of it. But what that means is you still have 25 years before you even retire, bro. 25, you could have 3 careers in that amount of time. Think about that. You could learn to do this, love it, become very proficient, and do it for 10 years. Like a decade of your life you could be doing this. Then you could just be like, all right, I hate this. I'm going to go do like whatever. I'm going to be a plumber. Go do that for 10 more years. Completely master it. be proficient at it, licenses, then quit that, and then you could have another thing for another 5 years before it's even time to retire. And let's be honest, most people, because of Social Security and the way that our world works these days, most people are not retiring at 65. You know, like a lot of people are having to work till they're like 70, 75. But you have so much time left in your life. You're not too old for anything, bruh. Too old for things starts when you're in your 60s. Like once you hit 60, don't be an electrician, because at that point you should be coasting. You should be doing something indoors that like is low impact on your body, that, you know, like you can kind of chill and make money and use your mind to make you money rather than having to break your back to make you money. So anyways, no, dude, 40 years old, you're not too old for fuck all, dude. You're still young. I love that question. That question gets asked so much. I have like 27-year-old people ask that question, and I'm like, get back in that womb, bro. What are you, 27? You're a child still. Your brain just finished growing 2 years ago. Are you kidding me? Ugh. All right, Garson Chung. In what situation would you use a 4-way switch? Please explain. All right, 4-way switch. A 3-way switch is where you have 2 doorways. And from 2 different places, when you walk in or walk in the other side or walk in or out, whatever, these 2 different doorways both need to have a switch next to them to control the lights in, say, this room that I'm in. If I have 1 door, then that means I have a single pole switch over there that controls these lights. I don't need a 3-way for that. If I have 2 doors, I need a 3-way. 3-way switch on that side has the incoming power. Then there's travelers that goes to a leg that goes up to the lights. That's how a 3-way works. But what happens when you add another door? That's when you need a 4-way. So if I have a 3rd door in a room, then I would have a 3-way on one side, a 3-way on the other side, and in the middle of them, I have to run to a 4-way switch. So it's 3-way, travelers that go to a 4-way, travelers that go to this 3-way, and then a leg that goes up to your lights. Now there is a way to do California or like a dead end 3-way kind of situation. We're not going to get into that. But that is why you would use it. So like you can do multiple doors. Like say you have like 17 doors in a room, which I've had probably close to that. It's where you have like, I had a big commercial job, big like trucking facility, and every single one of their roll-up bay doors, they wanted to have a switch by so that they could, no matter what door they came in or out of around this whole entire building, every egress and entrance had a switch that was on a 4-way system that could control these lights. So the reason that they still call it a 4-way with 17 doors is because it's the device that's the 4-way. It's not like the number of switches, like that should be a 2-way because it's 2 doors, and then it should be a 3-way because there's 3 doors. It has nothing to do with that. The actual 3-way device has 3 screws. The 4-way device has 4 screws. So if you're doing like, I had a house one time that we had to do, the lower level of this house had a front door that went in. There was a stairwell that came down. So by the front door, they needed a switch to turn all the cans on in this one huge room. But when you came down the stairs into this huge room, at the bottom of the stairs, they wanted a switch too, just in case they were going up and down the stairs. And then once you got down the stairs and you turned right, there was a whole suite of bedrooms down there. So coming out of that hallway, those people needed a switch to turn the lights in this room on. There's like a bar area. So coming out of there, they wanted to be able to turn them on or off. Then there were 2 patio doors that went out to their pool. Again, this is all in the same one room. These 2 doors, they wanted switches too, because if they're coming in and the house is dark, they want to turn them off, or if they're going out and they want to turn the lights off, you know, each one of them. And then to the left, there was more bedrooms and there was a garage. And so every one of these places needed a switch. So all I did is the very first one, I dropped a 3-way switch. And then I went from location to location with travelers, and every one of those was a 4-way switch. And then the very last one was a 3-way switch that went up to the leg. So you always have 2 3-ways, whole shitload of 4-ways in between, but that's why you would use 4-ways. It's just if you have multiple places that you need to control the same lights. Okay, Raul Leon, is that like a lowercase I, E-O-N? I don't know. Y'all and your damn names. Can't make it, like, where are the Steves? Just a guy with, his username is Steve. All right, can you install slim recessed cans under ceiling joists? Yes, that is the point. That is the whole point of them making them slimline now, is that you don't have to worry about where you're cutting a hole. It will fit in. The ones that have like little springs on them, they're spring held. And then they have like a ballast or driver that is able to be remote. So you can kind of like tuck the thing up there and then stick this thing up in place. But yes, absolutely. I love them for remodels, especially because you don't have to cut in big remodel cans. I hate remodel cans. Sometimes you have to get like shallow ones too, because you got the big deep ones that are like 7.5, 8 inches tall, and then you go stick it up there and you're like, oh crap, or you cut a hole and you realize like you're underneath a furnace, there's plywood, and you're like, oh. So you have a 2x6, which is 5.5 inches, so you have to go get a shallow can. Anyways, for remodel situations, I love those. For new construction, I still use new construction cans, because like, why not? It's all new construction. And I don't want to just leave loops and then have to go cut in all of the cans later, but that's just a preference thing. Anyways, answer is yes. Okay, so let's move on to a little bit more technical stuff. These are the more technical questions. We've got Derek Northway. What's your opinion on solar? What do you mean, bro? Do I like solar eclipses or like solar sails that are put on spaceship? Now I know you're probably talking about solar panels, but what specifically do I like them? Do I hate them? Do I think companies that install them are good opportunities for electricians? Would I ever own a solar company? Have I ever worked on solar? Do I think that like they're massively hazardous to the environment, so it's kind of like negating the whole like green thing that we're doing once we start taking them in their end of life and we have to put them in a landfill and it's like toxic? Like, there's so much to answer there. So I'm sorry. I wish your question was a little bit more, I'll still give you something. Let's say you're talking about being a solar company. So here in Austin, most places I think this is probably true for, solar companies are just solar companies. They're not like electrical contracting companies. Usually there's like one electrician that's done a couple years of electrical work. Not usually like a 15-year electrician that works for these companies. It's usually some like residential wireman with 2 or 3 years of experience, so that way the company can get away with paying less for somebody that kind of knows what they're doing. And then everybody else for the company is like laborers, like just cheap laborers. Now, that's not always true. There are some companies out there, I'm sure there are electrical contractors that only do solar work. So this is not true for everybody. This is just what I see around me. So be that what it may be. But there's a lot of these companies around that they charge such low margins because the materials are so expensive. A lot of them are banking on rebates from the city to be able to get part of their revenue in. So it's just kind of a tricky money fuckery kind of thing. So a lot of the time they can't afford to have an entire electrical company with like paid journeymen and masters and all these apprentices that they have to pay large wages. So a lot of them pay very cheap wages to just cheap laborers to go install all the stuff, and then they got one guy that's got a license and he comes and hooks everything up and deals with the inverter and all of that stuff, ties it into the electrical system. So to be an electrician, to get into solar is kind of silly, really. If that's the game in town, like, it's not a game I want to play. I would rather be in the electrical contracting side where, the materials are still high, but there's a higher margin. You can pay people. Everybody that works for you has to be licensed. It's just it's a different beast. So solar's not something that I would want to mess with or like have a company and do anything with. Plus just the liability of like having to reinforce anything up on top of a roof, and you've got like extra insurance and stuff that you have to think of that's structural, that you're like changing structurally what's happening to this roof. There's just more liabilities and stuff, so I wouldn't want to mess with any of it. I hope that answers your question. That just wasn't a very specific question. There's a lot of different parts that I could have an opinion on. All right, we got Blackwater Defense. In an instance like this, this is on the WRTR receptacles video. In an instance like this, do you calculate box fill or no, because you're basically replacing the same fill that was there? No, so I don't worry about box fill. When I'm putting one receptacle into a box and I've got like one set of wires coming into the box, I'm not going to worry about box fill. Like, I know that a standard bell box is like a single gang bell box is going to be like 16, 17 cubic inches. The deep ones might be like 20 or 21 cubic inches. So that means that, like, you know, if each conductor is 2.25, well, here, you know what? Let's just go in. For those of you that don't know, open your code books up. Seriously, like, just pause this right now. It's good. It's good practice. You might learn a thing or two. All right, so box fill is going to be 314. Specifically 314.16 kind of lays out how you're supposed to calculate how many conductors you can put in a box, how many devices, all of that stuff, and whether or not by code all of this stuff can fit in the box that you are using. So what he's asking is, do you do like a box allowance for the situation that I was doing? So if you look at table 314.16b, it says volume allowance per conductor. So you actually have to figure out what the volume of one conductor is. And then I've got 3 coming into this box. So I'm using number 12. So you go to the left column, number 12, go all the way to the right column where it says 2.25. You're using cubic inches. I don't use cubic centimeters for anything. I don't use metric for anything really. So each one of the wires, I have 3 wires that go into the box. 2.25 times 3, that's 6.75. Then I've got a receptacle. So if we go back a page, we're in 314.16. B, I believe, box fill calculations, conductor fill. Yeah, B4. It says device or equipment fill, each yoke or strap containing 1 or more devices or equipment, a double volume allowance in accordance with table 314.16b shall be made for each yoke or strap. Okay. And that's based off the largest conductor if you have multiple different size conductors, but we don't. So it's saying I have 1 yoke, basically a receptacle, the metal part that the receptacle is mounted to, that the metal part that you actually screw it in place with, that's called the yoke or the strap of the device. So on a single yoke, if I have a device, I have to have a double allowance, a double volume allowance. So I go back to that table. It's based off the same conductor size that I have in there. So it's still going to be using the number 12, going over and seeing it's 2.25. So the device alone would be 2.25 plus 2.25 for the double allowance. So that would be 4.5 plus 6.75. That's 11.25 or whatever. So knowing that, if my box is either 16 or 17, or if it's a deep box and I know it's like 20 or 21, I'm like way within my allowance. So to answer your question, really, I don't worry about box fill until I start stuffing a bunch of conductors in or a bunch of devices in. So if I've got like a 2-gang box and I know I've got like a hot coming in, hot going out somewhere else in the circuit, and I've got a couple of switch legs leaving, and then I've got some travelers coming in, that's when I look at the box and I'm like, all right, what is it stamped on the inside of this box that the cubic inches are for this specific box that I'm using? Do I need to use a deeper one? What is all of my, all the different conductors that I have? And then I read through the code and figure out the devices and everything. The one thing that I think is silly is that they consider a device, and every device is completely different in size. So I think each device should be figured out based off of the device's cubic inch volume. So I think each device should have stamped on it what its volume is. Just because like a single pole switch is a tiny little device, barely takes up any room inside of a box. But then you got a duplex receptacle that takes up like probably 4 to 5 times more than that. Well, no, probably twice as much. Yeah, probably like stack them twice side by side. Probably takes up twice as much room. But then you got a GFI, which now is like double that even. That's like twice as much volume because that thing sticks back into the box so much. It's just a huge like block cube thing. Or if you're doing like Lutron, Maestro, Radio Raw kind of stuff, like that stuff just takes more room in the box. And then now you've got like Leviton, not Leviton. Who are they? Legrand, they're making the USB GFCIs. Everybody's gonna start making them. But bro, that thing is so deep. It's the biggest electrical device I've ever seen. But they're calling that a device. And a little toggle switch, the same thing. There's no way, dude. You can barely jam that USB GFCI in a box. So they need to start putting the volume on devices and a lot like. It's going to make it harder for us on our job because we're going to be able to fit less conductors in boxes. I don't know, make boxes deeper or like figure it out. But it seems really silly if we're going through all this work to do box fill. If the devices are all so very different, then they should have a different volume and each one should be stamped for its own volume from the manufacturer. All boxes are, why aren't all devices? Anyways, all right. Luis Lopez. If you had a weatherproof box with a cover, could you use a GFCI instead? What's the difference between a WRTR and using a GFCI in this situation? So same video, installing WRTR receptacles. I put a WRTR duplex receptacle in. He's asking, could I have put a WRTR GFCI in instead? And yes, they actually make WRTR GFCIs as well. Had there not already been a GFCI at the front of this circuit, I would have probably done that. I would have definitely done it if there was no GFCI protection, but there already was protection, so I just put a regular WRTR receptacle in. They make WRTR GFIs, they make WR GFIs, they make TR GFIs. Just to answer your question, they've got all kinds of different devices that you can mix these ratings around with. And then the bubble cover, or the in-use cover that I was using, comes with a whole bunch of different moldings on the inside, a bunch of different face plates essentially. So I was using a duplex receptacle, so I pulled out the duplex plate and put that into the in-use cover and slapped it in place. But I could easily have just taken that off. There's a GFCI one that I could have put on and put that in place. So all of these bubble covers or in-use covers come with a whole bunch of different configurations for toggle switches, for Decora switches, for duplex receptacles, for single receptacles. Some of them even have for welder plugs and stuff like that. Beach and board fan. Is it true that AFCI breakers are only good for 5 years? What? Is that even, what? I have never heard that. Good for 5 years? Bro, they're so expensive. What? There's no way. There's no way that that's true. I've never heard anything like that. And I deal with a lot of these manufacturers. I feel like at some point one of them would have told me hey guys, by the way, I know it costs $2,000 for all of these AFCIs and DFs that you have to put into this panel, but in 5 years, they're not going to be good anymore. So you're going to have some pissed off customers that are going to have to pay another $2,000 for you to rip all of these out and scrap them because we made shitty products that didn't last more than 5 years. And you're going to have to put $2,000 more worth of breakers in, plus the cost of you doing it, probably another $500-600 worth of labor. No fucking way. Sorry, dude. There's just no way that that's true. You'd have so many pissed off people. Now you do have to test GFIs. They recommend GFCI breakers, or AFCI breaker and GFCI breakers, that you test them, every month. I don't know a single person on the planet that actually does that and gives a shit about it. But that's the only recommendation I see. But no, no, man. Now you may find some that go bad within that time, depending on the brand you're using, for sure. Seems like a lot of Eaton's stuff doesn't last the long term. I'd be replacing a lot of them shits. But that's neither here nor there. All right, next up we've got Joe Nathan. Would a Type 2 SPD reduce LED flickering with load changes in a house? Man, I don't know. LED flickering with load changes in a house. Load changes in a house and LED flickering are often two very different things, man. So LED flickering doesn't happen. LED flickering can happen for a whole lot of reasons. There's the little flutter, there's the big time blinky blink flicker, but a lot of LEDs that are shitty, just cheap made overseas somewhere for the lowest cost, they're just shit. They have shit components, so they flicker a lot. Sometimes if you have, say you had some string lights or something that were halogen MR16, and you have a low voltage transformer that's transforming 120 volts down to 12 volts, and it's a halogen transformer. Well, those transformers most of the time are they're not anywhere near precise. A lot of them put out dirty output voltage just because they don't need to for the halogen lights to light up. It's just incandescent lighting essentially, so you don't have to have the same kind of power. With LED, you need pretty precise, clean power. So flickering can happen in that case. If you have a dimmer that is LED dimmer, but you have lights LED lamps that are not dimmable, they're not rated to be dimmable, you're gonna have flickering that's gonna happen. If you have an LED dimmer that is not matched with the lamps, like a lot of times Lutron actually puts out a list of lamps that they test that are dimmable, that they say like, these lamps work with these dimmers, so sometimes you'll have fluttering there. But there's a whole host of other reasons, like the end of life, sometimes lamps start to flutter when they're going bad. Some have like a minimum load. There's some electronic ballasts out there that if you don't put a minimum load, a certain amount of wattage of lamps on the output side of that driver or ballast, it won't power them. So if you don't exceed the minimum load, they're just not going to work. So there's like all kinds of different reasons, things that could make them flutter, but the actual surge protector being the thing, I don't know. Like I've seen people, I've actually tried this as well, putting ferrite rings on the conductors, because a ferrite ring is essentially creating like a certain, it's like cutting off the tops and bottoms of a waveform. Sort of. It's like allowing a certain bandwidth of that waveform to come through, because it's a non-linear waveform a lot of the time, or it's not a pure sine wave. So if you can kind of cut the tops and the bottoms, which is essentially what a surge protector does, it just kind of minimizes a surge. So the theory is that putting a ferrite ring on a lot of the fluttering lights will fix them. I have tried it several times. I've tried every different kind of like size. They're all different ratings. I've tried putting them on the neutrals. I've tried putting them on the legs, the incoming power. I've tried every combination of things that you could do with ferrite rings, and I have not personally had any luck with it. I have noticed sometimes it minimizes the flutter, but the flutter's still there. So it doesn't necessarily like delete everything, but I would imagine that a surge protector is probably going to do the same thing. A surge protector doesn't cut out surges. A surge protector just minimizes surges. So surges still happen every time an appliance turns on in your house, your AC kicks on, dryer kicks on, something like that. You still have these surges that hit power, but a surge protector just makes them like this instead. So it just minimizes the surges. So you can look more. I have a surge protector video that I did, but it talks about difference between like a ring wave surge or oscillation and a spike. Either way, they're still going to hit the appliance. So those kind of things would still hit the lighting. So I don't think it would make them not do anything. But usually when you're talking about something like that, incoming power, big switching or something like that, it kind of lowers the lights and then brings them back up. It doesn't make them sit and flutter. At least I've just never noticed anything like that. So my guess, purely a guess, off the top of the dome without doing any like research or thought into it, is that I don't think it would have any effect. If anything, if it did, it might just minimize it, but I don't think it's going to delete it or make it disappear, because I don't think that that's the problem. I think the problem is usually locally with the light, or with the driver part of the light, or the dimming part of the circuit. Okay, so next up, Mac Fisher. Seems like there's no consensus on equipment bonding of propane or natural gas metallic systems to the electrical system. What is your take? What are you seeing in the field? There's stuff about grounding electrodes and gas piping. There's stuff about bonding. Actually, let's just break into it. Fuck it. Let's talk about, it's probably going to be in part 3, which is grounding electrode. Well, let's look at grounding electrodes. We'll look at bonding, and we'll look at equipment grounding, because there's a chance you meant equipment grounding, but didn't. Nah, there's no way you meant equipment grounding. Anyways, so part 3, open your code books up. You might learn something. Part 3, if we go to 250.52, where it talks about grounding electrodes, sorry. If you look under part B, it says not permitted for use as grounding electrodes. So this is a mention of what you might be talking about. I don't know. Probably not, but this is where metal underground gassing piping systems are listed. It says as not permitted for use as a grounding electrode, the following systems and materials shall not be used. It says metal underground gas piping. So in that situation, you would not use them as a grounding electrode. It does under that informational note, C250.104B for bonding requirements. You said equipment bonding, so I'm guessing that's kind of what you're talking about. So bonding is going to be part 5. Yes, part 5. There's A. We're going to be 250.104. It said B, I think. Yeah, so 250.104 is the bonding of piping systems and exposed structural metal. So metallic systems, as you mentioned, it would still be structural metal if the natural gas and propane tanks are like on a struct. That's what I don't know if you're talking about, like the tanks and the kind of like structure for the system, or if you're talking about the piping that's entering a structure. If you're talking about the piping that's entering the structure, there's definitely something in 250.104B under other metal piping. It says if installed in or attached to a building or structure. So not anything to do with the propane tanks or any kind of equipment or anything like that. But once the conductor, or once the piping comes in and touches a structure, that's where we have to bond it to our structure, because that's where all of our electrical stuff is. There's nothing electrical out there. And if there is stuff out there for these tanks, if there's like meters or any kind of electronic equipment or anything like that out there, then yeah, you would have to bond something like that, because there's electrical equipment. So you would use an equipment grounding conductor, but you wouldn't use the piping as the equipment grounding conductor. You would just have to bond it. Where it says other metal piping, this is where they're talking about actually at a building or structure. A metal piping system, including gas piping, that is likely to become energized shall be bonded to any of the following. Bonded to the equipment grounding conductor for the circuit that is likely to energize the piping system, service equipment enclosure, grounding conductor at the service, which is the neutral, grounding electrode conductor if of sufficient size, or one or more grounding electrodes used if the grounding electrode conductor or bonding jumper to the grounding electrode is of sufficient size. So that's saying, again, anything that is touching a building or a structure, anytime that piping is coming into a building or on the building in any way, we do have to bond it. So I kind of think that answers your question. I don't know where the no consensus comes from, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding what you're asking. So unfortunately, I think if I didn't answer it, try to re-ask it in a different way. There's one more place that we should look. Part 6 is equipment grounding, equipment grounding conductors. But I already know 250.118. There's nothing in here talking about equipment grounding conductors. Like you can't use gas lines as an equipment grounding conductor. So I just don't know what else you might be talking about. Equipment bonding of propane or natural gas metallic systems to the electrical system. Yeah, I mean, if it feeds the structure and everything in the structure is bonded, we have to bond anything like that coming in as well. Now, there's some places that don't require you to bond them, but that's, like local jurisdictions and stuff like that will have their own allowances. Some places don't want you bonding the gas lines. Some places do, but it says right here in code that you do need to. The metal water piping system has to be bonded, and any metal piping, gas piping that is likely to become energized shall be bonded. Nicholas Moore, if the 2020 code requires a surge protection device on a main panel, does that use up one of your 6 handles on a panel without a main disconnect? Okay, so surge protection, the answer is no. But in 230 in services, we have the 2 to 6 handle rule. So every service, 230.71 maximum number of disconnects. Each service shall only have 1 disconnecting means unless the requirements of 230.71B are met. So in A, it says for the purposes of this section, a disconnecting means installed as part of a listed equipment and used solely for the following shall not be considered a service disconnecting means. So in part 2, when we say the 2 to 6 service disconnecting means, we already know anything that's listed in A, 1 through 4, is not one of those service disconnecting means and is not considered for the 2 to 6 handle rule. And it specifically says, number 2, surge protection devices. So there's your answer. No, a surge protection device. If you have like a snap-in surge protector or something like on a square D panel, I mean, obviously you don't have a handle there, but if you do have a breaker that feeds a type 2 SPD, that breaker that's feeding that is not part of the 2 to 6 handle rule, as according to 230.71 A and B. Hope that answers your question. Okay, our guy 936, why do we use purple in Houston but others use orange on the contactor shorts video? I think you're probably talking about high voltage colors using orange. A lot of people on high voltage use brown, orange, yellow to identify that voltage class, whereas red, black, blue is the lower, 240 volt voltage class. The reason a lot of people like to use brown, yellow, purple instead of brown, orange, yellow is that we use orange to identify high legs when we have a grounded delta system. So in a 240 volt delta system, it's something where you would have like a 3-phase panel, and between phase A and B and C and A and C, you have 240 volts like you normally should. But if you take any one of those phases, if you take like A phase to ground, you're gonna have 120. If you take C phase to ground, you're gonna have 120. But if you take B phase to ground, and you mark this orange on purpose, you get 208 volts. And that is what we call a high leg, and it's a kind of a dangerous thing if you don't know what you're getting into. If you just put like a regular single pole breaker on it and run something out to a circuit, you're gonna feed 120 volt devices with 208 volts. So you have to be very careful in those environments. So that is the orange color, and that's what most people know orange as. So to have a 880 volt system that also uses orange could just be kind of confusing. Probably not, because all the other conductors, all the other colors in there should give it away. But some places just don't want the confusion. They want to make everything a lot more clear and clearly identify every conductor for a specific purpose. So a lot of them will use brown, yellow, purple and just get rid of the orange thing for only wild legs or high leg systems. All right, now we got the last section, the technically nothing questions, the fandom, random, and etc. Zachary Stahl, really enjoyed the code time of this episode on the WRTR receptacle episode. Hope to see more small snippets of code in the future. Yes, my dude, I'm just trying to add a lot more code into everything. You know, the big Monday videos where I'm doing like service calls and stuff like that. The shorts, not so much, because the shorts are just like a condensed kind of like how to very quick kind of thing. Code takes a while to explain, so that kind of negates a lot of what I'm doing to put those in a short. But yeah, a lot of people seem to like it. So I'm trying to make code relevant, not just sit and talk code because it's boring as fuck, but like find specific situations that apply to something and then adding code into it, because that's really how you're going to learn code out in the field. Is like you run across something, you pull your code book out. How does it apply to this? Put the code book away, you know? So anyways, glad you're liking it. All right, Tyler James, who is your main supply house that you use? I don't have a main supply house that I use. I use whoever I need for very specific things. So like City Electric is one of them that we have here in town. There's tons of City Electrics, so depending on what part of town I'm in, they might get my business. There's Hill Country Electric, which there's a north and a south store. You know, like North Austin has one, South Austin has one. They're more of a Square D house, whereas City Electric's more Siemens. There's, you know, like Eaton, or not Eaton. There's Granger around. There is Dealers Electric. Again, just kind of depends. A lot of them are like Cutler Hammer specific. Some of them are more geared up for commercial. Like that's a reason that I would use Hill Country, because they're largely commercial. If I need industrial stuff, there's a place called Guardian here in town that they do a bunch of motor controls, and they can custom build contactors and all kinds of stuff. So like it's a lot more specialized controls and things like that. It depends. I'll use Home Depot. I try for the life of me to not go to Lowe's all the time. I just don't get me started on Lowe's. For a lot of reasons, I use Home Depot. I think most of us in the trades do. They're just more geared up for tradespeople, and they get it. Lowe's is much more DIY, craftsy kind of. Just gonna leave it at that. So I hope that answers your question. I don't really use one over the other. I use all of them. Just kind of depends on where I'm at in town and what brands I need, who has what. I need like a dual function breaker for a CH panel, and I can't get that from the normal supply house that I would have that's close to me, so I'd have to like order it from somebody else or whatever. I use Amazon a lot, but I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to buying materials. I just get what I need from whoever has it. And then, you know, as you buy things from people over time, you get better pricing. You can kind of negotiate your pricing based off the volume you do. So there is a little bit of a benefit in having like one kind of main supply house. But It depends on the volume that you do, because you could have several supply houses that you do business from every single day, just depending on the job. So anyway, sorry, that's kind of like a lackadaisical non-answer to your question, but that's all I got time for, folks. Okay, so we had the answer to the question. I'm going to reread it just to make this video a little longer. It's not long enough already. The question was, what is a conductor installed on the supply side of a service or within the service equipment enclosure or enclosures, or for a separately derived system that ensures the required electrical conductivity between metal parts required to be electrically connected? It is a supply side bonding jumper. Oh, yay for all of you that got it right. All right, I'm shutting this shit down. I'm starting to get a case of the crazies. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, for putting up with all these things. If you don't already, please subscribe. Help a brother out. If you already watch all of these, just subscribe. Like, do me a favor, please. It helps me. Also, join the channel if you want to be real gangster. Hit the like, hit all of the, like, follow me on Twitter, the things, Twitter. Nobody ever uses Twitter. Well, nobody, people use Twitter for very different reasons. Most electricians I find don't use Twitter. That's why the Twitter logo is always like super small. Drake's really funny about that. Anyways, the Instagram, the Facebook, that stuff. I love you, crazy fuckers. I'll see you in the next one.
Descant music and video.